what's it going to take to get the Rust Belt economies going again the way they were when I was a kid?
Yeah, and to say it's going to be the way they were, it probably isn't. But it's going to be. No society. I hear people on the coast sometimes say that in Congress or in the Senate too that we're post-manufacturing economy. We just need to not worry much about manufacturing. We need manufacturing as for the wealth it creates, for the national security it brings, for the economic security it brings to our families. We're not going to see steel mills of 10,000 people, but we are going to see good paying manufacturing jobs and can continue to. I think alternative energy is the most important of all in terms of rebuilding and stimulating our economic base. I think we're going to see smaller companies doing it, but I think we're going to see I think we're going to see a lot of job growth, a lot of new companies, and a lot of entrepreneurs. I think government's got to do some programs to work with small manufacturers. Small companies have trouble exporting because they don't have the skills. They don't have the ability to hire people that know how to export. Small companies have trouble with all kinds of things large companies don't. In the government, there's something called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We spend about $100 million a year on as a country. The president tries to almost zero it out of the budget every year. We restore it. Senator Cole from Wisconsin and I are looking to do some pretty innovative things with that group to help these small companies. We also need a tax law and trade law that encourages economic development in this country. The reason there are a whole bunch of tax laws are part of the reasons we don't do the solar panels and the wind turbine components in this country. We don't have predictable tax laws. We don't have we have trade policy that clearly undercuts, especially our small manufacturers. And until we do universal health care, our manufacturers can't compete. Where every product made in this country is made. Most products includes the cost of health care, while in other countries they don't do it that way. So I think until we do those kinds of things, we don't rebuild the manufacturing base the way we need to. Thanks. Good. Yeah, go ahead, you can, and then go ahead. You. All right. Tell me your name and your affiliation if you don't mind.
Noel Levy. I live in Pikesville, Baltimore County. I've been getting emails from this group for at least 3 years.
All right.
I think I can speak for just about everybody in this room that we don't really want even one more penny spent on Iraq. What can you do to help us sustain Bush's veto of the Iraq bill, and or what can we adjourn Congress for the rest of the year? I mean, I want to see our troops home ASAP. Yeah. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks. And I wish I had a good, quick answer. We don't. I talked to Ted Kennedy about this at length a couple of times early in the year, and his view from his having, been up close in Vietnam, and this will be unsatisfactory. What I'm going to say probably to you and is to me in a lot of ways. But his view is that you just keep forcing the issue, and you just keep voting, and you over time, and unfortunately over time strains your patience. But over time, more and more Republicans turn against the White House and either do one of two things: vote to override a veto, or go to the White House as a group in block, several prominent Republicans, and say, you've got to change on this to the president. And I don't think that we're not going to cut total funding off. That's just not going to happen. So I just think I think we do a short-term appropriations, and we have benchmarks in there and then if they don't meet the benchmarks, which they haven't yet, either the Iraqis or our political civilian leadership, and then it makes it a little easier to cut it next time. We just got to keep going that way. I really had trouble understanding Bush's view of this until one morning, Condoleezza Rice invited the freshman senators of both parties, one Republican, 9 Democrats, I like that ratio, to the State Department to have breakfast with her one day, and probably in January, it's early in our term. And she sat, the first thing she said was that, and I don't know if she was sort of playing to the Democrats by saying, she said, I have a painting of Dean Acheson right outside my office. We were in a conference room, and she was saying out down the hall there, outside of her office, there's a painting of Dean Acheson. And she went on to explain that Dean Acheson was a hero of hers. She sees the world without psychoanalysis here, in some myopic way through Soviet studies. That was her field, and I think she sort of sees history through the Cold War more than anything. But what she said that was most compelling to me, or most illuminating to me, was that Dean Acheson did unpopular things, got a lot of criticism, but history bore out what he did and said. And whether you agree with that statement's not the point. The point is that she and the people running this government now, running the White House, think it doesn't matter what the public says, doesn't matter what the evidence is today. What matters is that 25 years from now, history will show them right. And I don't know anybody that believes that, but I do know that I'm almost 100% sure that they believe that. And that's what makes this so aggravating and so frustrating and so difficult to argue with them and to show them evidence that this escalation is not working, that the policy has been wrong-headed from the beginning and is increasingly wrong-headed, and that there's just any appeals to logic don't work with them, because they think, Cheney thinks that way. 25 years from now, history will show they were right because they stood up to the terrorists. And I want to stand up to the terrorists. I just don't think we should do it in Iraq. And so I just think we just keep the pressure on and keep the pressure on until we just force them, until we get enough numbers and get enough Democrats elected, enough, I don't want to wait that long, get enough Republicans changing their mind and continue the pressure on them.
One last question.
Hi, I'm Diane Sines, and I'm with the Science Communication Network here in Washington, formerly of the Pew Hispanic Center. Economist Alan Blinder recently predicted that due to accelerated globalization, we're seeing a much faster export of not only low-skilled jobs, but also sort of information age jobs abroad, and that government doesn't appear to be providing enough of a safety net for Americans who went and got their college education and advanced education in order to prepare for that information economy. What are leaders doing to provide that safety net to allow people to continue to provide for their families while they retrain for other work?
I appreciate your question. I think it's way beyond the safety net, because we're never going to be able to provide a safety net dense enough and wide enough to deal with all the problems of globalization without changing the direction of globalization. And Blinder, every time there was a trade agreement in the Senate or House, there was always talk of, okay, we'll do this trade agreement, and then we'll have enough money, we'll do enough worker retraining and safety net and assistance for the workers. And then as it worked its way through the process, the safety net money just kind of got jettisoned, and it just ended up being a trade agreement. So, no more trade agreements until we change direction and until we really do provide what we need to. And job training, job retraining is never enough. In my community, most place where I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio, a town of 50,000, had 7 or 8 major national companies you would have heard of. Tappan Stove was located there, Westinghouse, Fisher, all these companies, big companies that are almost all are not there now. And companies like that, communities like that, are just a shadow of what they were in terms of jobs. And we continue on this path. We don't, safety net so people lose their jobs in a place like Mansfield for a $13 an hour job building tires, and they end up at a $7 or $8 or $9 job, no matter how well retrained they are. I think there's several things. I mean, first of all, a very different trade policy. We're not going to pass trade promotion authority the way the president wants. I think we have a very good chance. And I think we have a very good chance of defeating any or all of the 4, Panama, South Korea, Peru, and Colombia. Especially Colombia and South Korea are the most likely to be defeated of the 4. But all 4, we have a very good chance. All 9 members, the new, is it 8 or 9 Democratic Senator, new Senator? I guess I was saying 9. It's either 8 or 9. We have, I think all of us will vote again. I mean, I think this whole class will be against these trade agreements, at least against TPA, if not the others too. So we clearly have made a very different look at this. But I think the reason the trade debate has changed, in part, and Alan Blinder is a very good example, you mentioned him at the beginning, is that now these jobs, these lost jobs, are now middle class and some highly educated people. Whose jobs are under threat, including radiologists, including a whole lot of people that that are computer programmers, people like that. And so they're much more able to get, just like the Vietnam War, as middle-class kids were getting drafted, a whole lot of middle-class people turned against the war, and their congressmen and senators listened to them. It's the same thing on the trade debate, and that's Alan Blinder weighing in and others. And that's why, one of the reasons I'm so hopeful that this is going to be a very different kind of trade regiment that we're going to, and with a new president in 2008, particularly if it's a Democrat, we're going to see a very, very different trade policy. On labor standards, environmental standards, food safety standards, doing the intellectual property stuff right. There are all kinds of opportunities there. We need to do the safety net, but we also, most importantly, need to redirect globalization in a way that creates wealth for everybody. And let me tell one real quick story about sort of kind of how this, it's kind of how I looked at this initially. In the late 90s, after NAFTA, I flew to Reynosa, flew to McAllen, Texas, and went with a couple union organizers to Reynosa, Mexico, and we went to visited a home about the size of this stage here, a home of 2 General Electric workers, no running water, no electricity. If they're dirt floor, if it rained, the floor turned to mud. Two full-time workers at General Electric Mexico. Behind their little shack was a ditch 4 feet wide, maybe, human industrial waste flowing through it. Who knows what it was? The American Medical Association said the most toxic place in the Western Hemisphere. We then walked through this neighborhood, and the homes were constructed of packing materials from the companies for which they worked. You could tell where people worked or the suppliers for those companies. We went nearby to an auto plant. Looked just like an auto plant in Avon Lake, Ohio. Modern, good technology, clean floors, workers working hard, productive. One difference between the auto plant in Mexico and the auto plant in Ohio, and that is the auto plant in Mexico had no parking lot because the workers didn't share in the wealth they created. They couldn't afford the cars, and you could go to China and go to a Nike plant, and the workers can't afford the shoes, or go to a Costa Rican Disney plant, and the workers can't afford to buy the toys for their children. And what's happened with globalization is, and what's started to happen in this country to the middle class, is workers are no longer sharing in the wealth they're creating for their employers. And that's the story of globalization. That's why we need a very different globalized regimen, if you will, economic regimen with the kind of rules and regulations that built this country and helped to create a middle class in this country.